A battered alien freighter limped into orbit around Carxon 7, its hull scored with deep gashes and its navigation array barely functional. The captain, a burly Varaxian with skin like weathered leather, gestured wildly as he recounted his narrow escape to the assembled reporters who had gathered at the orbital station. "Those beasts," he spat, mandibles clicking with agitation. "They came from nowhere. 6 legs, armor plating like battle cruisers, and acid, actual corrosive acid, spraying from their maws. My first mate lost an arm before we could even power up our weapons." He pulled back his jacket to reveal a blackened, partially dissolved chest plate. "The locals call them Shreeth. I call them Death Incarnate. No sentient being has any business on that rock unless they're carrying heavy artillery," the reporters murmured, recording devices humming as they captured every detail of the captain's harrowing tale. The Shreeth were legendary even among hardened space travelers, gigantic raptors that ruled Carxon 7 with ruthless efficiency, so perfectly evolved for killing that even the planet's indigenous warrior species gave them wide berth. As the captain continued his tale, a smaller shuttle glided into the docking bay. Unlike the battered freighter, it bore the clean lines and subtle markings of the human diplomatic corps. The bay fell silent as the airlock cycled open. Dr. Emily Nakamura stepped onto the deck with a quiet confidence that immediately drew attention. The human xenozoologist wore standard expedition clothing, no battle armor, no visible weapons. Her only equipment appeared to be a simple datapad and a small pack slung over one shoulder. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her eyes surveyed the gathering with calm interest. One of the reporters broke away from the captain's group, hovering device recording as she approached. "Dr. Nakamura, is it true that Earth's Xenozoological Institute intends to study the Shreeth? After what happened to the Varaxian expedition, Study them?" The captain barked a laugh. "You'll be studying the inside of their digestive tracts." Nakamura smiled, unperturbed. "We turn predators into partners. Captain, it's something of a human specialty." She tapped her datapad, bringing up a holographic display of Earth's historical apex predators, wolves, big cats, bears, alongside images of their domesticated descendants. "Where you see monsters, we see potential allies." The captain's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "You're insane." "Perhaps," Nakamura replied, her smile never wavering. "But we've done it before, and we'll do it again." As she walked toward the station's interior, the reporters swarmed around her, questions flying, but Emily Nakamura's attention had already shifted to the swirling storms visible through the viewports, where the surface of Carxon 7 waited below, a deadly crucible where her theory would either be proven or become her epitaph. The descent to Carxon 7's surface was anything but smooth. The shuttle bucked and shuddered as it plunged through layers of corrosive clouds, acid rain pelting the reinforced hull with a sound like angry fingernails. Lieutenant San, the expedition's engineer, gripped his harness with white-knuckled intensity. "Readings are off the charts," he muttered, eyes fixed on the environmental displays. pH levels that would dissolve standard equipment in seconds. Atmospheric toxicity beyond our normal filtration capacity. He shot a glance at Nakamura. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" Dr. Nakamura's eyes never left her own displays, which showed not atmospheric conditions but detailed biological scans of the surface below. "Every ecosystem achieves balance. San, even the deadliest ones." She tapped a section of the display, enhancing an area where massive shapes moved through a crystalline forest. "Look there. Shreeth hunting patterns. Notice how they avoid the purple sectors. Those must be the spore-releasing fungi the preliminary probes detected." The pilot's voice crackled through the cabin. "Approaching the Rulkani settlement. Brace for final descent." The shuttle broke through the cloud layer, revealing a landscape that seemed designed by evolution specifically to kill. Vast jungles of crystalline fungi stretched in every direction, their translucent structures glowing with internal bioluminescence. Between these deadly forests ran rivers, not of water, but of liquid methane that carved glowing blue channels through black volcanic rock. And above it all, storm clouds churned continuously, occasionally releasing downpours of acid rain that sizzled when it struck the ground. "Paradise," Sa'an muttered sarcastically. "It is to the species that evolved here," Nakamura replied, genuine fascination in her voice. "Life always finds a way. Lieutenant, our job is to understand its methods." The shuttle descended toward a settlement nestled between two massive rock formations that provided some shelter from the storms. Unlike the sleek lines of human architecture, the Rulkani outpost was organic and asymmetrical, built from local materials that had been treated to resist the corrosive atmosphere. Guards stood at regular intervals, each armed with weapons that looked capable of stopping a charging rhinoceros, or worse. As the shuttle settled onto the landing pad, Nakamura gathered her equipment. "Remember," she said to Sa'an and the 3 other members of their small team, "we're guests here. The Rulkani have survived on this world for generations. They know things about Carxon 7 that no amount of scanning can tell us." "They also think we're soft," Sa'an responded, checking the portable containment field generator he designed specifically for this mission. "I read the briefing. The Rulkani respect strength above all else." "Then we'll show them our kind of strength," Nakamura said with quiet determination as the shuttle doors hissed open, revealing the deadly world beyond. The air of Carxon 7 hit them like a physical force, hot, heavy with strange scents, and carrying a metallic tang that made human tongues curl. Even through their protective gear, the team could feel the hostility of the environment. This was not a world that welcomed outsiders. A delegation of Rulkani waited on the landing pad, tall and powerfully built, with mottled gray-green skin that blended perfectly with the local terrain. They stood with the easy confidence of predators on their home turf. Their eyes, 4 per individual, arranged in a diamond pattern, regarded the humans with undisguised skepticism. The leader stepped forward, her crest of hardened scales rising slightly in what the briefing materials had identified as a gesture of authority. "I am Captain Raleigh of the 3rd Hunter Cadre," she announced, her translator rendering her complex clicks and whistles into standard English. "We did not expect you to actually come." Her upper eyes narrowed. Most outsiders who hear of the Shreath wisely change their plans. "We appreciate your welcome, Captain," Nakamura replied with a respectful nod. "I'm Dr. Emily Nakamura, xenozoologist from Earth. This is my team, Lieutenant Sa'an, our engineer, and our field specialists," she gestured to the others, who nodded in greeting. Raleigh's lower eyes scanned their equipment. "No weapons? Not even defensive armor?" Her crest flattened in what might have been amusement or disdain. "The tales of human foolhardiness appear to be true. We come to study, not to fight," Nakamura explained. "Fighting the apex predator of any world is rarely the most efficient approach to understanding it." "Understanding?" Raleigh made a sound that the translator didn't bother to interpret, but which clearly conveyed incredulity. "The Shreath are not to be understood. They are to be avoided or, when necessary, killed. They have ruled the wild lands since before my ancestors first crawled from the acid pools." Nakamura smiled. "On Earth, we once said similar things about wolves and bears. Now they guard our homes and help raise our children." This statement caused a ripple of what might have been laughter among the Rulkani delegation. Raleigh's crest fully extended, definitely indicating amusement now. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion inside. Dr. Nakamura, before the evening spore release begins, unless you wish to experience firsthand what happens when foreign tissue contacts Carxon fungi." "Lead the way, Captain," Nakamura replied, unfazed. As they followed the Rulkani toward the settlement's central dome, she whispered to San, "Note how they move, always aware of their surroundings, constantly scanning. They've evolved alongside the Shrioth for generations. They know exactly how dangerous their world is. Which makes me wonder," Saan muttered back, "why they're so interested in our suicide mission." "Because," Nakamura said with a small smile, "if we succeed, it changes everything for them too." The Rulkani settlement was a marvel of adaptation. Inside the protective domes, the air was filtered but still carried the planet's distinctive scent. Walls made from treated local stone glowed with embedded bioluminescent organisms that provided light without heat. Everywhere, the humans saw evidence of a society that had evolved specifically to survive in one of the galaxy's most hostile environments. They were led to a central chamber where a semicircle of older Rulkani waited, their crests more elaborate and their skin patterns more complex than those of their younger counterparts. These, Nakamura knew from her research, were the elders, survivors who had lived long enough to accumulate wisdom worth preserving. "The humans who think they can tame Shrieth," announced the central elder, her voice crackling with age. "I am Elder Vextai. For 63 cycles, I have watched fools die on our world. You would not be the first." Nakamura stepped forward and, to the surprise of the Rulkani, performed a perfect rendition of their formal greeting, a complex series of hand gestures and postural shifts that acknowledged the elder's status while asserting her own worth as a visitor. Vextai's crest rippled with surprise. "You have studied our ways." "As I hope to study the Shrieth," Nakamura replied, "with respect for what they are, not fear of what they might do." Another elder leaned forward, his scales catching the light. "Tell us, human, why your species believes it can succeed where others have failed. The Shrieth have killed every being that has attempted to approach them with anything less than overwhelming force." Nakamura activated her datapad, projecting a series of images into the center of the chamber. "These are creatures from Earth's history. Wolves, capable of bringing down prey many times their size. Tigers, solitary hunters of unmatched power. Bears, omnivores strong enough to tear apart. Armored vehicles." The images shifted, showing the same animals in different contexts. Wolves working alongside human hunters. Tigers performing in ancient human entertainment. Bears trained for various tasks. And these are the same species after generations of cooperation with humans. We did not defeat them through superior strength. We offered partnership. "Partnership," scoffed Rala from the side of the chamber, "with mindless killers." "No predator is mindless," Nakamura countered. "Each has evolved specific intelligence suited to its ecological niche. The Shrieth, from what little observation we've been able to conduct, show signs of complex social structure, territory marking, and possibly even rudimentary tool use. These are not the behaviors of mindless killers." The elders conferred among themselves in their native language, the clicks and whistles too complex for the translator to fully capture. Finally, Vextai spoke again. "Words are easy. Dr. Nakamura, any being can claim understanding of the hunt until the fangs close around their throat." Her 4 eyes fixed on the human with an evaluating stare. "If you truly believe what you say, prove it." "I intend to," Nakamura replied steadily. "Not eventually." Now, Vextai gestured, and a large display activated on one wall of the chamber, showing a map of the surrounding territory. 3 days from now, a clutch of juvenile Shrieth will emerge from their hatching grounds here, in the Crystal Basin. Capture one, alive. Show us this. Partnership you claim is possible. Murmurs ran through the chamber. Even among the Rulkani, such a challenge was considered extraordinarily dangerous. Juvenile Shrieth might be smaller than adults, but they were quicker, more unpredictable, and always under the watchful protection of the adult pack. Nakamura studied the map, her expression thoughtful. "And if I succeed?" Then we will listen to what you have to say about cooperation, Vextai replied. But know this, human, no Rulkani will risk their life to save yours if you fail. This challenge is yours alone. Not quite alone, Nakamura corrected, glancing at her team. But I accept your terms, with one addition. The elder's crest flattened in surprise. You would add conditions to our challenge? I would expand it, Nakamura said. I will not just capture a juvenile Shreath. I will calm it, begin its training, and then, this is crucial, I will return it safely to its parent pack. Stunned silence fell over the chamber. Even Sa'an stared at his superior in disbelief. That is not possible, Raleigh declared flatly. Once taken, no creature returns to the Shreath. They kill any being that carries the scent of outsiders. Then proving otherwise would certainly demonstrate the validity of my approach, wouldn't it? Nakamura's eyes held a quiet confidence that seemed to discomfit the Rulkani. 3 days, as you said. We'll begin preparations immediately. As they left the chamber, Sa'an grabbed Nakamura's arm. Have you lost your mind? He hissed. Capturing a juvenile might have been possible with a containment field, but returning it to the pack, they'll tear us apart. Perhaps, Nakamura admitted. Or perhaps we'll learn something that changes our understanding of interspecies communication forever. She looked back at the Rulkani, who were watching them with expressions ranging from amusement to grudging respect. Besides, Lieutenant, they've just told us exactly where to find what we came for. The rest is just details. Details, Sa'an muttered, like staying alive on a planet that's basically engineered to kill us. Minor details. Nakamura's smile held an edge of excitement that Sa'an had seen before, the expression of a scientist on the verge of discovery. Life adapts, Lieutenant. So will we. The preparations for the expedition consumed the remainder of the day. The human team converted one section of their shuttle into a temporary containment area, with Sa'an working feverishly to modify his containment field generator for the specific biological signatures of juvenile Shreath. The other team members analyzed the limited data available on Shreath behavior, compiled from the few remote observations that had survived the hostile conditions. Dr. Nakamura, meanwhile, spent hours in conversation with those Rulkani willing to speak with her. Most considered the humans' mission to be suicidal folly, but a few, particularly younger warriors who had encountered Shreath during hunting expeditions, provided valuable insights. They communicate through scent and subsonic vocalizations, explained a young female named Tisara, who bore a distinctive scar across her lower face. My hunting party was tracked for 3 days by a mated pair. They coordinated perfectly without ever seeing each other. One would drive us toward the other's position. How did you escape? Nakamura asked, recording every detail. We didn't, Tisara replied bluntly. They were testing us, learning our capabilities. When a storm approached, they simply left, as if they had decided we weren't worth the effort when easier prey might be available elsewhere. Intelligence, Nakamura murmured. Cost-benefit analysis. These aren't just instinctive hunters. They're thinking predators, Tisara agreed, which is why your plan will fail. They will recognize your trap for what it is. Then we won't set a trap. Nakamura decided. We'll make an offer. Later that evening, as Carxon 7's strange twilight bathed the settlement in purple-tinged light, the human team gathered for a final briefing. Outside, the crystalline fungi had begun their nightly spore release, filling the air with glowing particles that drifted on the wind like deadly fireflies. The crystal basin is approximately 20 kilometers from the settlement, Nakamura explained, displaying a 3-dimensional map. We'll take the rover to this ridge, then proceed on foot to avoid alerting the adult Shreath to our presence. Assuming they don't smell us coming, Sa'an pointed out. Everything we've learned suggests their olfactory senses are extremely acute, which is why we'll be using these Nakamura held up a small container of translucent gel. The Rulkani use it to mask their scent during long hunts. It won't make us invisible to the Shrioth, but it should reduce our detectability to the point where curiosity might override aggression. That's a big might, one of the field specialists commented. Everything about this mission is speculative, Nakamura acknowledged. We're working from limited data and extrapolating based on terrestrial analogs, but the principles of predator behavior are remarkably consistent across ecosystems. She zoomed in on a section of the map. The juveniles will be emerging from subterranean hatching chambers here. They're vulnerable during their first hours in the open, which is when we'll make our approach. And the adults? San asked. We'll be hunting, Nakamura replied. According to Rulkani observations, adult Shrieth always conduct a major hunt just before juveniles emerge. They bring back enough food to sustain the young during their initial growth phase. So we have a window, the second field specialist summarized. While the adults are away, we grab a juvenile, begin the taming process, and then, what? Walk it back to its family like returning a borrowed pet? Not exactly, Nakamura said. San has modified his containment harness to include sensory feedback mechanisms. As the juvenile acclimates to human presence, we'll gradually introduce controlled interactions. By the time the adults return, we should have established enough of a rapport to demonstrate non-threatening intentions. Should, San repeated dubiously. Science is built on should, Lieutenant, Nakamura reminded him with a small smile. We hypothesize, we test, we observe, and sometimes we make history. She closed the display. Get some rest, everyone. We leave at first light. The night passed fitfully for most of the team. The constant sounds of Carcassonne 7, the hiss of acid rain against the dome, the distant howls of unknown creatures, the crystalline tinkling of fungi in the wind, created an alien symphony that kept human minds alert for danger. Only Nakamura seemed truly at ease, reviewing her notes until late into the night cycle, occasionally making adjustments to her approach based on new insights. Morning brought a brief respite from the storms. The sky cleared enough to reveal Carcassonne 7's primary sun, a bloated red giant that cast the landscape in bloody light. The human team loaded their equipment into the rover, a heavily modified vehicle with treads designed to navigate the treacherous terrain. A small group of Rulkani had gathered to witness their departure. Captain Raleigh stood at the forefront, her crest slightly raised in what humans had learned was an expression of grudging respect. You actually intend to go through with this? She stated as Nakamura approached. Of course, Nakamura replied. Knowledge is never gained by staying safe in familiar territory. Raleigh made a gesture that the translator interpreted as skeptical amusement. There is a fine line between courage and foolishness. Human, my people have not survived for generations on this world by crossing it lightly. Yet here you are, Nakamura observed, sending regular expeditions into Shrieeth territory, studying them from afar. You're as curious as we are. Captain, you've just been limited by your history with them. Limited by wisdom, Raleigh corrected, but there was something in her tone, a hint of uncertainty, perhaps even envy, that caught Nakamura's attention. Would you like to come with us? Nakamura asked suddenly. See our methods firsthand? Raleigh's crest flattened in surprise. You would welcome a Rulkani on your mission? After Elder Vextai specifically stated we would not aid you. Observation isn't aid, Nakamura pointed out, and having someone with direct experience of Shrieeth behavior could prove invaluable. For a long moment, Raleigh seemed to consider the offer. Her four eyes blinked in their distinctive pattern, top pair, bottom pair, alternating in what the humans had learned indicated deep thought. Finally, she shook her head. I cannot. The Elder's challenge was clear. This is your test to face alone. She hesitated, then added, But I will monitor your progress from the command center. If you succeed, or if you need extraction, I will know." Nakamura nodded, understanding the unspoken offer. Despite their skepticism, the Rulkani were not indifferent to the human's fate. "Thank you, Captain. We'll be in touch." With a final exchange of formal gestures, the human team boarded their rover and set out toward the Crystal Basin. As they cleared the settlement's protective barrier, the full hostility of Coxon 7 enveloped them. The air shimmered with toxic particles. The ground steamed where patches of acid had pooled, and in the distance, the crystalline forest swayed in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, as if the fungi themselves were watching the intruders pass. "Engaging environmental shields," Sa'an announced from the driver's position. A humming field surrounded the rover, creating a protective bubble against the worst of the atmosphere's corrosive elements. "Life support nominal. Terrain analysis active." Nakamura sat beside him, her attention divided between the landscape and her datapad, which continuously updated with readings from the rover's extensive sensor array. "The basin is approximately 3 hours away at current speed. That should put us there just as the juveniles are emerging. Assuming the Rulkani intelligence is accurate," one of the field specialists commented from the rear compartment, where she was performing final checks on their portable equipment. "They've survived here for generations by understanding Shreath behavior," Nakamura replied. "I trust their observations, even if I don't share their conclusions." The journey through Coxon 7's wilderness was a masterclass in hostile environments. Twice they had to detour around massive sinkholes that had opened overnight, filled with bubbling substances that the sensors warned would dissolve their vehicle in minutes. A brief shower of acid rain forced them to deploy the rover's reinforced canopy, the protective material sizzling as droplets struck it. And always, the crystalline forests loomed on either side of their path, occasionally releasing clouds of spores that drifted like glittering snow in the blood-red sunlight. "Beautiful," Nakamura murmured as they passed particularly spectacular formation of fungi, its translucent structures refracting light into prismatic patterns. "Deadly, but beautiful. Like everything on this planet," San agreed grimly, carefully navigating around a patch of ground where smaller fungi had begun to colonize the path. "Even the microbes here could probably kill us. Yet life thrives," Nakamura pointed out. "The Rulkani, the Shreath, these fungi, they've all found their niche in this ecosystem. Balance through adaptation." "Speaking of balance," San said, nodding toward the display, "we've got movement ahead, large biosignatures, moving fast." Nakamura leaned forward, studying the readings. "Shreath hunting party, adult specimens, based on the mass calculations." She checked their position against the map. "They're heading away from the basin, just as the Rulkani predicted. The hunt has begun." Sa'an slowed the rover, taking it behind a massive rock formation that would shield them from direct line of sight. "Do we wait for them to clear the area?" "No," Nakamura decided. "This is perfect timing. We'll use their departure to approach the basin undetected. The juveniles will be emerging soon, and we want to be in position." She turned to address the team. "Prepare the containment equipment and apply the scent masking gel. From here on, we proceed with absolute caution." The team disembarked, leaving the rover concealed behind the rocks. Each member carried specialized equipment, San with his modified containment harness, the field specialists with monitoring devices and sample collection kits, and Nakamura with a small pack containing what appeared to be food items. "What are those?" San asked, nodding toward the pack as they began their cautious approach to the ridge overlooking the crystal basin. "Synthetic protein compounds," Nakamura explained, "based on the prey animals Shreath typically hunt, but modified to contain mild neurochemical agents that promote calmness and reduce aggression." "Drugged snacks?" San translated with a raised eyebrow. "You're going to try to sedate it?" "Not sedate," Nakamura corrected. "Just encourage receptivity. Every successful domestication in Earth's history began with food rewards. Wolves became dogs because humans shared their kills. Wildcats became domesticated because humans protected grain stores from rodents. It's about establishing mutual benefit. They reached the ridge and carefully positioned themselves behind a cluster of smaller rocks. Below them stretched the Crystal Basin, a vast depression in the landscape where the ground glittered with mineral deposits. At the center, a series of mounds rose from the basin floor, each about 2 meters high and covered in a hard, shell-like material. "Hatching chambers," Nakamura whispered, binoculars raised. The juveniles tunnel upward and emerge through the caps when they're ready to join the surface ecosystem. "How many are we expecting?" one of the specialists asked. Rule Kani records suggest 3 to 5 per hatching season. Nakamura replied, "We'll focus on the smallest, likely the last to emerge and potentially the most receptive to human interaction. Or the hungriest and most desperate?" San muttered. "That too," Nakamura admitted. "Every opportunity comes with risk, Lieutenant." They settled in to wait, monitoring the hatching chambers through binoculars and sensors. The basin remained quiet except for the occasional skittering of smaller creatures, 6-legged scavengers that the Rule Kani called skitterclaws, which survived by following Shreath packs and feeding on the remains of their kills. "Interesting symbiosis," Nakamura noted as she observed the scavengers. The skitterclaws clean up after the Shreath, preventing the accumulation of rotting matter that might attract competing predators. In return, they receive protection from the Shreath's territorial behavior. "You think the Shreath are consciously allowing them to stay?" San asked skeptically. "Not consciously, perhaps, but through evolutionary advantage," Nakamura explained. "Packs that tolerate skitterclaws likely experience fewer diseases and face less competition over generations. That tolerance becomes instinctive behavior." Their conversation was interrupted by a subtle vibration beneath them. The ground trembled, and dust rose from the hatching chambers. Nakamura's eyes widened with excitement. "It's beginning," she whispered. "Everyone. Final preparations. Remember, no sudden movements, no loud noises. We observe first, then make our approach when I give the signal." The cap of the nearest hatching chamber cracked, a spiderweb of fractures spreading across its surface. Then, with a sound like breaking pottery, a section collapsed inward. A moment later, a narrow, chitin-covered head emerged, swiveling from side to side as it tested the air. "First juvenile," Nakamura narrated softly into her recording device. "Approximately 1/3 adult size, but with proportionally larger sensory organs, eyes, scent glands clearly visible along the neck ridge." The young Shreath pulled itself free of the chamber, revealing a body structure that seemed both reptilian and insectoid. 6 powerful limbs supported a torso covered in overlapping plates of natural armor. Its tail, tipped with what appeared to be a crystalline structure, swept back and forth as it gained its balance. "Defensive adaptation," Nakamura noted. The tail structure matches the surrounding mineral formations, camouflage for hunting in the basin. 2 more juveniles emerged from adjacent chambers, slightly larger than the first. They immediately began a complex interaction, circling each other and emitting low, thrumming sounds that the human's equipment registered as partially subsonic. "Social establishment," Nakamura explained to her team. "They're determining hierarchy before the adults return." "Dr. Nakamura," one of the specialists whispered urgently. "4th chamber activating." All eyes turned to the farthest hatching chamber, where the cap was bulging upward rather than cracking. The movement was strained, erratic, different from the confident emergence of the other juveniles. "Something's wrong," Nakamura murmured, adjusting her binoculars for maximum magnification. "The juvenile is struggling." As they watched, the cap finally split, but instead of emerging smoothly, the 4th juvenile tumbled awkwardly onto the basin floor. It was smaller than the others, and one of its middle limbs appeared to be malformed. bent at an unnatural angle. "It's injured," San observed. "Probably since development. That's why it had trouble breaking through." The other juveniles immediately reacted, turning toward their struggling sibling. For a moment, the humans held their breath, uncertain what would happen. Then, with startling speed, the two larger juveniles charged. "They're going to kill it," one of the specialists gasped. "Culling the weak." "No," Nakamura said sharply, already moving. "They're establishing dominance. This is our opportunity." She grabbed her pack and the containment harness from San. "Be ready to move if I signal, but stay hidden unless absolutely necessary." Before anyone could object, Nakamura was sliding down the ridge toward the basin floor, her movements deliberately slow and non-threatening. She kept her body low, using the natural rock formations for cover as she approached the scene of conflict. The injured juvenile, which Nakamura mentally designated Jaku based on the Rulkani naming convention for Shreeth, was backing away from its siblings, its damaged limb clearly hampering its movement. The larger juveniles were advancing in perfect coordination, one moving slightly left, the other right, a pincer movement that would trap their weaker sibling. Nakamura reached into her pack and removed one of the synthetic protein compounds. Judging the wind direction, she tossed it gently to land several meters from the confrontation. The scent, designed to mimic the most attractive prey for Shreeth, immediately caught the attention of all three juveniles. Their heads swiveled in unison toward the unexpected food source. The two larger juveniles hesitated, their predatory instincts conflicting with the ongoing dominance display. Jaku, however, seized the opportunity. With surprising speed despite its injury, it darted toward the food, snatching it up in powerful jaws before retreating to a defensive position behind a rock outcropping. Nakamura smiled. Intelligence, opportunism, and self-preservation, all qualities that suggested potential for adaptation. While the other juveniles resumed their exploration of the basin, occasionally casting glances toward their siblings' hiding place, Nakamura carefully made her way closer to Jaku's position. From behind the rocks, she could hear the young Shreeth consuming the synthetic food, mandibles clicking as they processed the unfamiliar texture. Slowly, with deliberate movements, Nakamura positioned herself where she could observe without being immediately detected. Jaku was even more remarkable up close. Despite its injury, there was a liveliness to its movements, a constant alertness that spoke of high intelligence. As it finished the food, its sensory organs, fleshy appendages along its neck that resembled gills, fluttered rapidly, sampling the air. It had detected her presence. Nakamura remained perfectly still as the juvenile's head turned in her direction. Their eyes met, Nakamura's brown human gaze locking with the Shreeth's multifaceted amber orbs. For a breathless moment, neither moved. Then, with deliberate slowness, Nakamura reached into her pack and withdrew another food item. She placed it on the ground before her, then slid it forward with gentle pressure, never breaking eye contact. Jaku's head tilted, a gesture so reminiscent of curious canines that Nakamura had to suppress a smile. The juvenile's sensory gills fluttered again, analyzing the offering and the strange creature providing it. In that moment of mutual assessment, a connection formed, tentative, fragile, but undeniably real. It was the beginning of what Nakamura had traveled across the galaxy to find, the possibility of partnership between species that evolution had designed to be predator and prey. "Hello? Jaku," Nakamura whispered, her voice barely audible even to herself. "I think you and I are going to change this world together." The standoff lasted for what felt like hours, but was likely only minutes. Jaku remained behind its protective rock, occasionally shifting position to maintain visual contact with Nakamura while also monitoring its siblings in the distance. The injured limb clearly caused discomfort, but the juvenile compensated with remarkable adaptability. distributing its weight among its 5 functioning limbs. Nakamura maintained her position, the food offering still on the ground between them. Her training had taught her that patience was essential in initial contact situations. The prey animal that flees triggers the chase instinct. The one that remains still becomes an anomaly worth investigating. Finally, curiosity overrode caution. With a series of quick, darting movements, Jaku emerged from behind the rock. It approached the food in an indirect pattern. 2 steps forward, 1 to the side. Pause. Repeat. That Nakamura recognized as predatory assessment behavior. The juvenile was evaluating whether the strange being and its offering presented a threat. When it reached the food, Jaku extended its sensory gills to their full length, the fleshy appendages quivering as they sampled molecules from both the synthetic protein and Nakamura herself. Then, with a quick motion that betrayed its youth, it snatched up the offering and retreated several meters to consume it. "Progress," Nakamura whispered into her comm unit, knowing her team was watching from the ridge. "It's accepted food directly associated with my presence. Applying behavioral conditioning principles, this creates a positive association that we can build upon. Be careful." San's voice crackled in her ear. "The other juveniles have noticed the interaction. They're showing interest." Nakamura glanced up to see that the 2 larger Shreeth had indeed paused their exploration and were observing from across the basin. Their posture suggested curiosity rather than aggression, heads slightly lowered, sensory gills extended but not fully flared. "That's actually promising," Nakamura replied. "If they associate humans with food rather than threat, it establishes a foundation for the later stages of our plan." As Jaku finished the second offering, Nakamura slowly, very slowly, extended her hand, palm down in a non-threatening gesture. The juvenile froze, its entire body tensing. For a moment, Nakamura thought she had pushed too far too quickly. Then, to her amazement, Jaku extended its neck slightly, bringing its sensory gills within centimeters of her fingertips without actually making contact. The appendages fluttered rapidly, sampling her scent directly. "Remarkable," Nakamura breathed. "Voluntary proximity seeking. This species may be even more adaptable than wolves were." Encouraged by this progress, Nakamura prepared for the next step, introducing the containment harness. Unlike traditional restraints, San's creation was designed to be non-invasive, using a combination of lightweight materials and targeted energy fields to create boundaries without physical discomfort. "I'm going to attempt initial harness placement," she informed her team. "Stand by with secondary containment options if necessary." With the same deliberate slowness, Nakamura removed the collapsed harness from her pack. Jaku's attention immediately focused on the unfamiliar object, sensory gills flaring in what might have been alarm. "Easy," Nakamura murmured, her voice low and soothing. "This isn't a threat, just another step in our new arrangement." She placed another food item on the ground, this time directly beside the harness. Jaku's gaze shifted between the 2 objects, its advanced brain clearly processing the connection. After several moments of consideration, it approached once more, this time moving with greater confidence. As the juvenile bent to take the food, Nakamura activated the harness with a subtle gesture. The device unfolded silently, its energy field extending to create a gentle bubble around Jaku's torso. The young Shreeth jerked back in surprise, sensory gills fully extended in alarm. "Hold position," Nakamura instructed herself as much as her team. "Let it adapt to the sensation." Jaku made several quick movements, testing the boundaries of the containment field. Unlike a physical restraint, the field allowed full range of motion while preventing rapid acceleration or aggressive actions. It was, essentially, a behavioral guide rather than a cage. Exactly what Nakamura had specified in her requirements to San. The juvenile's reaction was fascinating. After the initial alarm, it began methodically testing the field's parameters, pushing against different points with varying degrees of force. When it discovered that slow, deliberate movements were unrestricted, its behavior immediately adjusted. It was learning the rules of this new game with impressive speed. Cognitive adaptation confirmed, Nakamura noted for her records. Subject demonstrates problem-solving capabilities consistent with high-level social predators. Comparison to terrestrial wolves is appropriate, possibly conservative. With the harness in place and Jaku becoming accustomed to its presence, Nakamura risked a slightly bolder action. She extended her hand once more, this time with another food offering in her palm. The invitation was clear. Accept closer contact in exchange for reward. Jaku considered the proposition, its multifaceted eyes seeming to evaluate not just the food, but Nakamura herself. Then, with decisive movement, it stepped forward and delicately took the offering directly from her hand, its mandibles carefully avoiding contact with her skin. Contact established, Nakamura reported, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. Phase 1 complete, far ahead of schedule. We're ready to... A piercing cry cut through the basin, echoing off the crystalline formations and sending vibrations through the ground itself. Nakamura's blood went cold as she recognized the sound from the briefing materials. The territorial call of an adult shriek. "Dr. Nakamura!" Sa'an's urgent voice came through the comm. "Multiple adult signatures approaching from the north. The hunting party is returning early." Nakamura looked up to see the other juveniles already responding to the call, their bodies oriented toward the sound, sensory gills fully extended in recognition. Even Jaku had gone rigid, its evolutionary programming temporarily overriding the nascent connection they had established. Change of plans, Nakamura decided instantly. We need to move now. Prepare the rover for immediate extraction. She turned her attention back to Jaku, whose behavior was becoming increasingly agitated as the adult calls continued. You're coming with us, little one, just for a while. Using the containment harness's guidance function, Nakamura began directing Jaku toward the ridge where her team waited. The juvenile resisted initially, its instinct to remain with its siblings conflicting with the new influence in its life. But the combination of the harness's gentle pressure and Nakamura's continued offering of food rewards gradually overcame its reluctance. They were halfway to the ridge when the ground began to tremble with greater intensity. The adult shrieks were close, too close. Nakamura could hear their heavy footfalls, the distinctive click hiss of their breathing apparatus. "Dr. Nakamura, you need to hurry," San urged through the comm. "They'll be in visual range in less than a minute." "Jaku is moving as fast as it can with the injury," Nakamura replied, noting how the juvenile favored its damaged limb even more under stress. "We can't rush this or we'll trigger its flight response." A decision had to be made. They couldn't reach the ridge before the adults arrived, and attempting to outrun full-grown shriek was suicide. They needed cover, immediately. Nakamura scanned their surroundings and spotted a dense cluster of crystalline fungi at the edge of the basin, the same formations that released toxic spores at twilight. During daylight hours, they should be relatively dormant, and their complex structure would mask biosignatures. "Change of direction," she instructed Jaku, guiding it toward the fungal grove. "We're going to hide." The juvenile seemed to understand the concept of concealment, perhaps recognizing it from its own hunting instincts. It followed Nakamura's lead more readily now, slipping between the crystal-like stalks with surprising agility despite its injury. Once within the grove, they pressed deep into its center, where the density of the formations created a natural chamber. Nakamura activated the harness's suppression field, which would dampen Jaku's natural scent and heat signature, hopefully enough to prevent detection by the adults. "We're in position," she whispered into her comm. "Hold your positions and maintain communication silence until the adults move on." Through gaps in the crystalline structures, Nakamura could see the basin floor. The two uninjured juveniles had gathered near the hatching chambers, their postures displaying what she interpreted as excitement as the first adult Shrieth came into view. The mature specimens were magnificent and terrifying in equal measure, standing nearly 4 meters tall. Their armored bodies gleamed with iridescent patterns that shifted with each movement. Sensory gills that were merely appendages on the juveniles formed elaborate crests on the adults, flaring and contracting as they communicated through complex chemical signals. Most impressive were their specialized forelimbs, which ended not in claws but in articulated appendages capable of manipulating objects, a feature that had led xenobiologists to classify them as tool users despite limited observational data. The hunting party consisted of 3 adults, each carrying portions of their kill, some large 6-legged herbivore that Nakamura didn't recognize from the briefing materials. They deposited the meat near the hatching chambers, where the juvenile Shrieth immediately began to feed under the watchful eyes of their elders. For several tense minutes, the scene proceeded normally. The adults circled the feeding area, occasionally sampling the air with their sensory crests. Nakamura began to hope they might escape detection entirely. Then, one of the adults, larger than the others, with distinctive scarring along its left flank, raised its head sharply, its sensory crest fully extended, rotating slowly as it processed some detected anomaly. With deliberate steps, it began moving toward the fungal grove. "It's coming this way," Nakamura whispered, heart pounding. "It's detected something." Beside her, Jaku had gone completely still, its own sensory gills flattened against its neck in what appeared to be a submissive or concealment posture. Whether this was instinctive behavior in the presence of dominant adults or a response to Nakamura's tension was impossible to determine. The adult Shrieth approached the edge of the grove, its massive head lowering to investigate more closely. Through the crystalline stalks, Nakamura found herself staring directly into multifaceted eyes that seemed to hold ancient, alien intelligence. Those eyes scanned methodically, searching for the source of whatever had triggered its senses. For a breathless moment, Nakamura was certain they had been discovered. Her hand moved instinctively to her emergency beacon, a last resort that would signal the team to initiate extraction protocols, likely at great risk to everyone involved. Then, something unexpected happened. Jaku, still under the influence of the containment harness, but acting with apparent volition, shifted slightly to place itself between Nakamura and the adult. It extended its sensory gills partially, not in threat or submission, but in what appeared to be communication. The adult's crest flared in response, and a series of subsonic vibrations passed between them, inaudible to human ears, but registered by Nakamura's equipment. For nearly a minute, this silent exchange continued, neither Shrieth moving except for the rhythmic pulsing of their sensory organs. Finally, the adult withdrew, turning back toward the hatching chambers with what almost seemed like deliberate disinterest. It rejoined the others, and soon the entire group, adults and the 2 uninjured juveniles, moved away from the basin, heading toward what must be their primary territory. Only when they had disappeared from view did Nakamura release the breath she'd been holding. "They're gone," she reported, voice shaking slightly. "And I think Jaku just protected us." "That's impossible," San responded immediately. "It's only known you for an hour. There's no way it would choose a human over its own kind." "Not choose," Nakamura corrected, watching as Jaku relaxed its posture, sensory gills returning to their normal position. "Communicate." It told the adult something, perhaps that we weren't a threat, or that it was handling the situation. Either way, it intervened on our behalf. Or the adult just didn't consider us worth the effort, one of the specialists suggested through the comm. "Possibly," Nakamura conceded. "But given what we know about Shrieth territorial behavior, that would be highly atypical." She reached out slowly and, to her amazement, Jaku allowed her to touch the top of its head, brief contact, but unmistakably voluntary. I think we've just witnessed the first true communication between humans and Shreeth, and it may have saved our lives." They emerged from the fungal grove cautiously, Nakamura continuously monitoring for any sign of the adult's return, with the containment harness guiding Jakku's movements. They made their way to the ridge where the rest of the team waited, wide-eyed at the close encounter they had witnessed. "That was either the luckiest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen," Sa'an declared as they reached the top. "And I'm still not sure which. Science often walks that line." "Lieutenant," Nakamura replied with a small smile. She gestured to Jakku, who was examining the rover with obvious curiosity. Sensory gills extended to sample its unfamiliar materials. But results speak for themselves. We have our juvenile, and we've already established basic trust protocols well ahead of schedule. The question is, what do we do now? One of the specialists asked. The challenge was to capture, tame, and return it to the pack. But after what just happened, we proceed as planned, Nakamura decided. We take Jakku back to the settlement, continue the conditioning process, and prepare for the final phase, the return. She glanced at the distant horizon, where the Shreeth pack had disappeared. But we've learned something crucial today. These aren't just intelligent predators. They're sentient beings with complex social structures and communication capabilities far beyond what the Rulkani have recognized, or been willing to recognize, San suggested thoughtfully. Remember, their entire culture is built around avoiding or killing Shreeth, not understanding them. Which is exactly why our success is so important, Nakamura said, watching as Jakku carefully investigated the rover's treads. We're not just proving humans can domesticate dangerous species. We're potentially redefining the relationship between two civilizations that have evolved side by side for generations. With careful coordination, they managed to guide Jakku into the rover's rear compartment, which had been modified to serve as a temporary containment area. The juvenile entered with surprising willingness, perhaps recognizing that the strange beings who offered food posed no immediate threat. Throughout the journey back to the settlement, it remained calm, alternating between periods of rest and intense observation of its new surroundings. Their arrival caused an immediate sensation. Word had spread throughout the Rulkani settlement that the humans had departed on their suicidal mission, and few expected to see them return. The sight of the rover approaching the main gate, intact and with all team members accounted for, was surprising enough. The realization that they had actually succeeded in capturing a live juvenile Shreeth caused near pandemonium. Rulkani warriors lined the path to the human quarters, their postures displaying a mixture of disbelief, alarm, and grudging respect. Captain Raleigh herself stood at the entrance, her crest fully extended in what Nakamura had learned indicated intense emotion, though whether positive or negative remained to be determined. "You actually did it," Raleigh stated as Nakamura disembarked. Her four eyes shifted to the containment area, where Jakku was visible through reinforced viewports. "You brought one of them here, into our settlement." "As we said we would," Nakamura confirmed. "This is just the beginning. Captain, the real work, and the real demonstration, is yet to come." Raleigh's upper eyes narrowed. "The elders wish to see this creature and to hear your report." "Of course," Nakamura agreed. "But first, we need to establish Jakku in the prepared habitat. The transition is a delicate phase in the process." "Jakku," Raleigh repeated, her crest flattening slightly in surprise. "You've named it?" "Names establish relationship," Nakamura explained. "It's a fundamental step in the domestication process, and Jakku follows your people's naming conventions for notable Shreeth as a sign of respect." Something shifted in Raleigh's demeanor, a subtle relaxation of posture, a lowering of her guard. "You continue to surprise us, Dr. Nakamura. Few outsiders bother to learn our ways, let alone honor them. Understanding begins with respect, Captain." Nakamura replied. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have much to do before tomorrow's presentation. The next several hours were a flurry of activity as the human team transferred Jakku to the specially designed habitat within their assigned quarters. Unlike traditional containment facilities, which emphasized security through isolation, Nakamura had specified an environment that allowed for continuous interaction while maintaining necessary safety protocols. The habitat consisted of a central living area surrounded by a modified version of Saan's containment field. The field allowed Jakku freedom of movement within its boundaries while preventing any potentially dangerous actions. Most importantly, it permitted direct human access without compromising security, essential for the intensive conditioning process Nakamura had planned. Once Jakku was settled, Nakamura began the next phase of their work. Using a combination of food rewards, vocal cues, and simple gestural commands, she initiated a series of training exercises designed to establish communication protocols. Saan and the field specialists observed and recorded every interaction, compiling data that would form the foundation of their report to the Rulkani elders. Notice the response latency, Nakamura pointed out as Jakku correctly identified a specific symbol she had introduced only minutes earlier. It's not just memorizing patterns, it's inferring meaning from context. That level of cognitive processing is consistent with some of Earth's most intelligent species. And it's picking up your voice patterns remarkably quickly, one of the specialists noted. The recognition response time is decreasing with each iteration. Nakamura nodded, unable to hide her excitement. We're witnessing the birth of genuine cross-species communication, not just conditioning, but mutual adaptation. She approached the boundary of the habitat, where Jakku waited attentively. Watch this. She extended her hand, palm up, a gesture they had been practicing. Jakku considered for a moment, then placed one of its forelimbs atop her hand. The contact was gentle, controlled, with none of the predatory intensity that characterized Shreath hunting behavior. Trust, Nakamura said softly, the foundation of partnership. Throughout the evening and well into Carcassonne 7's brief night cycle, the training continued. Jakku proved an apt pupil, its initial wariness giving way to genuine engagement with the novel challenges presented. By the time the team broke for a short rest period, the juvenile had mastered basic directional commands, simple object recognition, and preliminary social cues. It's remarkable, Saan admitted as they reviewed the day's recordings. I was skeptical. I'll admit that freely, but seeing it in action, he shook his head in wonder. You were right, Dr. Nakamura. There's real intelligence there, not just instinct. Intelligence shaped by evolution for survival on one of the galaxy's most hostile worlds. Nakamura agreed. Think of what we could learn from a species that has mastered life in these conditions. The Rulkani have survived here. Yes, but the Shreath have thrived. Speaking of the Rulkani, one of the specialists interjected, how do you think they'll react to tomorrow's demonstration? They've built their entire culture around avoiding Shreath, not working with them. Change is never easy, Nakamura acknowledged. But it's necessary for growth. The Rulkani are intelligent, adaptable beings. If we can show them a new possibility, a future where their two species work together rather than against each other, some will embrace it. She smiled slightly. Captain Raleigh, for one, I've seen how she watches Jakku. There's fear there, yes, but curiosity too. And the final phase? Saan asked, his expression serious. Returning it to the wild? After today's close call with the adults? That seems even more dangerous than we originally anticipated. It's also more promising, Nakamura countered. We've already witnessed Jakku communicating with an adult on our behalf. With another day of conditioning and the right approach, I believe we can facilitate a peaceful reintroduction. She yawned, the day's exertions finally catching up with her. But first, we all need rest. Tomorrow will be challenging enough without exhaustion clouding our judgment. The team dispersed to their sleeping quarters, leaving automated monitoring systems to alert them if Jaku showed any signs of distress during the night. Nakamura, however, remained behind, watching the juvenile as it explored its habitat with methodical curiosity. There was something deeply satisfying about witnessing the age-old process of domestication beginning anew, a dance between species that had shaped Earth's history now playing out among the stars. Morning brought renewed activity throughout the settlement. Word had spread quickly about the human success and their promised demonstration. By mid-cycle, a crowd had gathered in the central arena, a circular space normally used for Rulkani ceremonies and combat training. The elders sat in a raised section, their elaborate crests marking them as the settlement's leadership and most experienced survivors. Below them, warriors and citizens filled the remaining space, their postures betraying a mixture of skepticism, curiosity, and apprehension. At the forefront stood Captain Ral-E, her expression unreadable, but her attention fixed on the empty center of the arena. When Nakamura entered, leading Jaku on what appeared to be a simple tether, but was actually a modified version of the containment harness, a collective gasp rose from the assembled Rulkani. The juvenile Shrith moved with surprising docility, its injured limb still causing a slight limp but otherwise showing no signs of distress at being surrounded by beings its species would normally consider prey. "Greetings, honored elders," Nakamura began, performing the formal gestures with practiced ease. "As promised, we present the results of our challenge, a juvenile Shriath, responsive to human direction and calm in the presence of beings it would naturally consider hostile." Elder Vextai leaned forward, her aged eyes narrowing as she studied the scene before her. "You lead it like a domesticated creature," she observed, her translator rendering her clicks and whistles into standard English. "Yet it retains its natural weapons. What prevents it from turning on you? Human." "Nothing physical," Nakamura replied honestly. "The tether you see is a guidance tool, not a restraint. Jaku follows because it has learned that cooperation brings reward and security. It has begun to trust." "Trust," another elder scoffed. "Shrith know only hunting and killing. They are death made flesh." "With respect, elder," Nakamura countered. "All predators hunt. It is their evolutionary role, but intelligence allows for adaptation beyond instinct." She turned to Jaku and made a simple hand gesture. The juvenile immediately sat back on its haunches, its posture relaxed and attentive. "What you see is not the suppression of natural behavior, but its redirection toward mutual benefit." To demonstrate, Nakamura led Jaku through a series of increasingly complex interactions. The juvenile responded to vocal commands, identified specific objects, and even performed simple problem-solving tasks that required remembering previous instructions. Throughout the demonstration, it remained calm despite the presence of hundreds of Rulkani, beings that, by all evolutionary logic, should have triggered its predatory instincts. "Impressive," Elder Vextai acknowledged finally. "You have shown it can be controlled in artificial conditions. But this proves nothing about the species as a whole. One aberrant juvenile, separated from its pack, is hardly evidence of domestication potential." "True," Nakamura agreed. "Which is why the final phase of our demonstration is the most crucial and the most challenging. Tomorrow, we will return Jaku to its family group." Murmurs of disbelief swept through the arena. Captain Rale stepped forward, her crest partially raised in alarm. "Return it? Once it rejoins the pack, any conditioning you've established will be overridden by pack behavior. And the adults will certainly attack any being approaching their territory, especially humans bringing a juvenile that carries foreign scents. Under normal circumstances, yes," Nakamura conceded. "But we've already witnessed something extraordinary, a direct communication between Jaku and an adult that resulted in the adult choosing not to attack, despite our presence in their territory." She turned to address the entire assembly. What if that wasn't an anomaly? What if the Shreeth are capable of more complex social reasoning than your experiences have led you to believe? You risk your lives on what if, Elder Vextai stated flatly. Science advances through hypotheses tested by evidence, Nakamura replied. Our hypothesis is that Shreeth, like many of Earth's apex predators, possess the cognitive flexibility to form cooperative relationships with other species when mutual benefit is established. Tomorrow's test will provide evidence, one way or the other. The elders conferred among themselves, their private communication untranslated but clearly intense. Finally, Vextai spoke again. We will observe this final test, she declared. A delegation will accompany you to the territorial boundary, no closer, for our people's safety. If you succeed in returning this juvenile without bloodshed, we will consider your theories with the seriousness they may deserve. Her 4 eyes fixed on Nakamura with ancient wisdom. If you fail, your deaths will serve as yet another lesson in the true nature of Carcassonne 7's masters. We accept your terms, Elder, Nakamura replied with a formal bow. And we welcome the opportunity to demonstrate what partnership can achieve, even between species that evolution designed as adversaries. As the assembly disbanded, Captain Raleigh approached Nakamura and Jakku. The Rulkani warrior studied the juvenile with new intensity, her crest shifting through subtle patterns that suggested deep thought. You truly believe this is possible? She said finally. It wasn't a question. I do, Nakamura confirmed. Not just possible, but necessary. Imagine what your people could accomplish if Shreeth became allies rather than enemies. The territories currently too dangerous to access. The resources you could share. The knowledge you could gain from a species perfectly adapted to this world's harshest conditions. Raleigh's gaze shifted from Jakku to Nakamura. Your species has a strange vision of the universe. Human, where we see threats to eliminate. You see potential partners. It served us well, Nakamura replied with a small smile. Earth's history is filled with former adversaries who became our greatest allies, both other humans and other species. I will command the observation party tomorrow, Raleigh announced suddenly. I wish to see this partnership with my own eyes. If it fails... She left the sentence unfinished, but her meaning was clear. Then you'll have your answer about Shreeth nature, Nakamura completed. But if it succeeds, Captain, what then? Are you prepared to reconsider generations of established belief? Raleigh's crest flattened in what might have been amusement or resignation. I am a warrior. Dr. Nakamura. I survive by adapting to reality, not clinging to comfortable myths. She glanced at Jakku once more. Prepare your juvenile. Tomorrow will test us all. The final night of preparation was intense. Nakamura worked with Jakku late into Carcassonne 7's abbreviated darkness, refining the communication protocols they had established and introducing new elements that would be crucial for the reintroduction. San, meanwhile, modified the containment harness for remote operation, creating a system that would allow them to gradually reduce control as the juvenile rejoined its pack. The key is the transition period, Nakamura explained to the team during their final briefing. We need to maintain enough influence to prevent aggressive reactions while allowing natural pack integration to occur. Too much control, and the adults will perceive manipulation. Too little, and instinct could override conditioning. It's a narrow target, San observed grimly. And we're working with minimal data on adult Shreeth behavior patterns. We have something better than data, Nakamura countered. We have direct observation and established trust. She nodded toward Jakku, who was resting nearby, its injured limb showing signs of improvement under the care they had provided. And we have a juvenile who has already demonstrated the ability to communicate with adults on our behalf. You really believe it protected us intentionally? One of the specialists asked. That wasn't just your interpretation. Watch the recordings, Nakamura suggested. The positioning, the specific grill patterns, the adult's response, all consistent with deliberate intervention, but tomorrow will provide definitive evidence, one way or the other. As the team dispersed for a few hours of rest, Nakamura remained with Jaku, continuing the quiet conditioning that had established their bond. The juvenile had progressed remarkably in the short time they had worked together, showing intelligence and adaptability that exceeded even Nakamura's optimistic projections. "Tomorrow we take you home," she told the young Shrith as it responded to a complex series of gestures with perfect precision. "But I hope it's just the beginning of something new for both our species." Jaku's sensory gills fluttered in what Nakamura had come to recognize as acknowledgement. Whether the juvenile truly understood the concept of home was impossible to determine. But it had certainly grasped the pattern of the training, each successful interaction bringing reward and positive reinforcement, each new challenge building on established behaviors. Morning came too quickly. The expedition assembled at the settlement's main gate, the human team with their equipment, a delegation of Rulkani warriors led by Captain Ral-E, and several elders, including Vex-Tai herself, who had insisted on witnessing the final test firsthand, despite her advanced age. "Your confidence remains unshaken, human?" the elder asked as they prepared to depart. "Confidence in the process, yes," Nakamura replied honestly. "The specific outcome? That remains to be seen. Science embraces uncertainty as the path to discovery." Vex-Tai's crest shifted in what might have been amusement, a luxury that survival rarely permits. But we shall see which approach serves best today. The journey to the Shrith territory was tense. 2 rovers, the humans' modified vehicle and a heavily armored Rulkani transport, traveled in convoy across Carcassonne 7's hostile landscape. Jaku, secured in the human rover's containment area, showed increasing signs of excitement as they approached familiar territory, its sensory gills fully extended and constantly sampling the air. "It recognizes home," Nakamura noted, recording the juvenile's reactions. "Increased respiratory rate, heightened sensory activity, specific vocalization patterns we haven't observed before. Could be aggression," San suggested cautiously. "Territorial response?" "Possible," Nakamura acknowledged. "But the body language is different from what we've documented during aggressive displays. This is anticipation, not hostility." They reached the designated observation point, an elevated ridge overlooking a vast valley that the Rulkani identified as primary Shrith hunting grounds. Dense crystalline fungi grew in patterns that suggested deliberate cultivation, and the remains of large prey animals dotted the landscape, evidence of successful hunts. "The adult pack should be approximately 2 kilometers northwest," Captain Raleigh informed them as they disembarked. "Our sensors detected significant activity in that sector earlier today." "Perfect," Nakamura replied. "We'll proceed on foot from here. Just our core team and Jaku. The fewer beings present, the less threatening our approach will appear. You understand we cannot provide extraction if the situation deteriorates," Raleigh stated flatly. "Once you enter their hunting grounds, you are beyond our help." "We understand," Nakamura confirmed. She turned to her team. "Final equipment check. The containment harness is operating at minimal restriction levels. Communication systems are recording on all frequencies, and emergency beacons are activated but silent. Any questions before we proceed?" The team exchanged glances, but no one spoke. They had prepared extensively for this moment, analyzing every variable they could identify and developing contingency plans for those they couldn't. Whatever happened next would be the culmination of their mission, success or failure. A new understanding of interspecies relationships or a tragic confirmation of evolutionary barriers. "Then let's make history," Nakamura said with quiet determination. "One way or another." With Jaku now guided by only the lightest touch of the modified harness, they began their descent into the valley. The juvenile moved with increasing confidence as they entered familiar territory, occasionally pausing to investigate scent markers or examine specific landmarks. Its behavior was becoming less that of a captive and more that of a guide, leading them rather than being led. Fascinating social dynamics, Nakamura noted as they passed a series of distinctive scratch marks on crystalline formations. These appear to be territorial signifiers, possibly indicating family group boundaries or resource claims. "Are you seriously still collecting data?" Sa'an asked incredulously. "We're walking into the den of the planet's apex predator, and you're taking notes?" "Science doesn't pause for danger, Lieutenant," Nakamura replied with a small smile. "Besides, understanding their communication systems might be crucial for what comes next." They continued deeper into Shrieth territory, the landscape becoming increasingly organized in ways that suggested deliberate modification. Clearings had been created at regular intervals. Fungi had been selectively culled to create paths, and distinctive arrangements of rocks marked what appeared to be boundaries between different functional areas. "This isn't just a hunting ground," Nakamura observed with growing excitement. "It's a settlement. These aren't just predators, they're builders. Or they've just worn down the landscape through repeated use," San suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. Even to a skeptical eye, the organization was too deliberate to be accidental. Jaku's behavior changed as they approached a particularly large clearing. Its pace quickened, and its sensory gills fully extended, pulsing with patterns they hadn't seen before. It emitted a series of low, thrumming calls, not the aggressive sounds they had documented during the initial capture, but something more complex, almost melodic. "It's announcing our arrival," Nakamura realized, or possibly its own return. Either way, it's deliberately communicating. "Wonderful," San muttered. "So instead of surprising apex predators, we're announcing ourselves. Much better." "Actually, it is," Nakamura corrected. "Surprising predators triggers defensive aggression. Announced approach allows for assessment and consideration." They reached the edge of the clearing, where Jaku paused, seemingly waiting for something. Nakamura used the moment to activate additional recording protocols on her equipment, ensuring that whatever happened next would be thoroughly documented. "The adult pack should be," she began, but stopped as movement caught her eye across the clearing. They had arrived. 3 adult Shreeth emerged from the crystalline forest on the opposite side, their massive forms moving with the fluid grace of perfect predators. In the lead was the distinctive scarred individual they had encountered during the initial capture, the one Jaku had communicated with. Behind it came 2 others, slightly smaller but no less impressive in their lethal beauty. "Hold position," Nakamura instructed her team quietly. "No sudden movements. Let Jaku lead this interaction." The juvenile responded immediately to the adult's appearance. It stepped forward, moving beyond the loose guidance of the containment harness, and produced another series of thrumming calls. Its sensory gills pulsed in complex patterns, and its body language shifted to what Nakamura interpreted as non-threatening presentation. The lead adult, which Nakamura mentally designated Makar, based on the Rulkani naming conventions, responded with a similar vocalization. It approached slowly, sensory crest fully extended, each step deliberate and measured. The other adults remained at the edge of the clearing, watchful but not advancing. "It's assessing," Nakamura whispered, barely daring to breathe. "Not attacking. Assessing." Makar stopped several meters from Jaku, towering over the juvenile. For a long moment, they engaged in what could only be described as conversation, a complex exchange of vocalizations, scent signals, and body positioning that clearly conveyed information beyond simple threat or submission. Then, to the human's amazement, Jaku turned and looked back at them, particularly at Nakamura. It made a gesture with its forelimb, the same motion Nakamura had taught it to indicate approach. "It's," she realized, her scientific excitement momentarily overcome by simple wonder. "That's not possible," Sa'an hissed. "It can't understand the concept of introducing different species." "Why not?" Nakamura countered. "Pack predators routinely integrate non-related individuals. The cognitive leap to different species isn't that great, especially for a highly intelligent organism." She took a deep breath. "I'm going forward. Maintain your positions unless I signal otherwise." Before Sa'an could object, Nakamura began walking slowly toward Jaku and Makar. Her movements were deliberate, non-threatening, her hands visible and empty of anything that could be perceived as a weapon. Each step was a conscious statement. "I am not prey, not predator, but something else entirely." Makar's reaction was immediate and fascinating. Its sensory crest flared fully, sampling Nakamura's scent with extraordinary thoroughness. Its multifaceted eyes fixed on her with an intensity that felt like physical pressure, assessing everything from her movement patterns to her relationship with Jaku. When Nakamura was within 5 meters, close enough for the adult to strike with devastating speed if it chose to, she stopped and performed the gesture she and Jaku had practiced. Right hand extended, palm down, body slightly inclined forward. In the language they had developed together, it meant recognition and respect without submission. For what felt like an eternity, Makar simply watched her. Then, with deliberate slowness, it lowered its massive head until its eye level matched hers, not a submissive gesture, but one of direct engagement. Its sensory crest pulsed in patterns similar to those Jaku had displayed during their training sessions. "Remarkable," Nakamura breathed. "It's mimicking the communication protocols we established with Jaku." Jaku moved to position itself between them, performing a series of movements that alternated between touching Nakamura's extended hand and approaching Makar's lowered head. The behavior was unmistakable in its intent. Introduction, connection. The juvenile was deliberately establishing a link between the two species. "This goes beyond simple domestication," Nakamura said, knowing her team was recording every word. "This is active cross-species communication facilitated by a juvenile who recognizes both parties as social entities." Makar made a sound unlike anything they had recorded before, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to come from its entire body rather than a specific vocal apparatus. In response, the other adults at the edge of the clearing advanced slightly, their postures alert but not aggressive. "The pack is being called in," Nakamura realized. "This is the critical moment." As the other adults approached, Jaku's behavior shifted again. It positioned itself more deliberately between Nakamura and the newcomers, its body language suggesting protective positioning rather than threat. It was, in effect, vouching for the human's presence, communicating that this strange being was under its protection. The next few minutes unfolded with breathtaking significance, one by one. The adult Shrieth approached, examined Nakamura with their sensory crests, and then withdrew to a respectful distance. None displayed aggressive behavior, though their caution was evident in their positioning and continuous environmental scanning. "Dr. Nakamura," Sa'an's tense voice came through her comm unit. "Please be aware that the Rulkani observation party is detecting increased Shrieth activity throughout the area. More adults are converging on your position." "Understood," Nakamura replied quietly. "But I don't think it's an attack formation. They're curious. This is probably the first time they've encountered a non-prey, non-threatening species entering their territory." As if to confirm her assessment, more Shrieth began to appear at the edges of the clearing. 5, then 8, then over a dozen adults of varying sizes and crest patterns. They maintained distance, forming a loose circle around the central interaction between Nakamura, Jaku, and Makar. "It's the entire local population," Nakamura realized. "This is unprecedented observational access." Makar made another gesture, a sweeping motion with its forelimb that mimicked Jaku's approach signal. After a moment of hesitation, Nakamura understood. It wanted to see the rest of her team. "Lieutenant San," she called, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "Bring the team forward, slowly, hands visible, no sudden movements." "You can't be serious," San replied, audibly stunned. "I've never been more serious," Nakamura assured him. "This is what we came for. First contact with a species everyone else dismissed as mindless killers. Now, please approach before our hosts reconsider their hospitality." With visible reluctance, San and the two field specialists emerged from their position and began walking toward the center of the clearing. Their tension was evident in every step. But they followed Nakamura's instructions precisely, movements slow and deliberate, hands empty and visible. The assembled Shrieth watched with collective intensity, their sensory crests pulsing in synchronized patterns that suggested communal assessment. As the humans gathered in the center, Jakku moved among them, occasionally touching or gesturing in ways that clearly communicated connection and familiarity to the watching adults. "They're accepting us through Jakku's introduction," Nakamura explained quietly to her team. "Similar to how wolf packs integrate new members, established pack members vouch for newcomers, demonstrating that they pose no threat to group stability." "And if they decide we do pose a threat?" San asked under his breath. "Then we'd already be dead," Nakamura replied simply. "The fact that we're still standing here having this conversation means they've made a different assessment." Makar approached the assembled humans, its massive form dwarfing even the tallest among them. With deliberate movements, it extended one forelimb, not in threat, but in a gesture remarkably similar to Nakamura's own greeting ritual. The message was unmistakable: reciprocation, recognition. Nakamura mirrored the gesture, maintaining eye contact with the adult Shrieth. "We offer partnership," she said, knowing the words themselves were meaningless to the alien being, but that the intent behind them carried in tone, body language, and the shared context established through Jakku might transcend the language barrier. Something extraordinary happened then. Makar lowered its massive body to the ground, assuming a posture that exposed vulnerable areas: belly, throat, the junction of limbs where armor was thinnest. It was not submission, not exactly, but a deliberate display of non-aggression. A statement that could be translated across the gulf of evolutionary history. "I could kill, but I choose not to." Nakamura, understanding the profound significance of the gesture, slowly sat on the ground as well, maintaining the same deliberate eye contact. Her team, following her lead, did the same. For several long minutes, humans and Shrieth simply existed together in the clearing, neither threatening nor retreating, a momentary equilibrium between species that evolution had designed to be predator and prey. "Dr. Nakamura," San whispered finally, "the Rulkani are requesting an update. Their sensors show the Shrieth have completely surrounded our position." "Tell them," Nakamura replied, never taking her eyes from Makar, "that they are witnessing history, the beginning of a new relationship between three species that have shared this world without ever truly seeing each other." At the edge of the clearing, partially concealed by crystalline fungi but visible to those who knew where to look, Captain Raleigh watched the unprecedented scene unfold. Her four eyes blinked in the pattern that indicated deep thought, and her crest shifted through complex patterns that reflected emotional states with no direct translation in human terms. Beside her, Elder Vextai observed in silence, her ancient gaze taking in every detail of the interaction between humans and the predators her people had feared for countless generations. "It should not be possible," Raleigh said finally, her voice barely audible even to herself. "Everything we know about the Shrieth is based on fear, not understanding." Vextai completed the thought. Her crest settled into a pattern that indicated resignation mixed with wonder. "Perhaps that is what makes humans different from us. Captain, They came without the weight of our history with the Shreeth. They saw what could be, not what has been. This changes everything, Rala realized, watching as one of the smaller Shreeth adults cautiously approached the seated humans. Its sensory crest extended in curious examination. If the Shreeth can be approached, communicated with, if territories can be shared rather than contested, then our world becomes larger overnight, Vextai acknowledged, and we must reconsider much that we believed immutable. The elder's gaze shifted to focus specifically on Nakamura, who was now demonstrating something to Makar, a simple hand gesture that the massive predator was attempting to mimic with its own specialized forelimb. They are teaching each other. In the center of the clearing, unaware of the Rulkani observers, Nakamura had entered the most crucial phase of cross-species communication, establishing consistent, reproducible signals that could form the foundation of a shared language. Using Jaku as both example and translator, she introduced simple concepts: approach, retreat, food, danger. To her amazement and scientific delight, Makar not only comprehended the basic signals but began offering alternatives, movements more natural to Shreeth physiology that conveyed similar meaning. It was not just mimicry but active collaboration in building a communication bridge. "This goes beyond anything we hoped for," she told her team, who were alternating between assisting with the communication exercises and documenting every aspect of the historic encounter. "We expected to demonstrate that juvenile Shreeth could be conditioned to accept human presence. Instead, we're establishing the groundwork for genuine linguistic exchange with the adults. The implications are staggering," one of the specialists agreed, recording as another adult Shreeth successfully performed the food gesture Nakamura had introduced. If this level of communication is possible with minimal preparation, imagine what could be achieved with sustained effort and proper resources. Jaku, meanwhile, had become the center of attention for several juvenile Shreeth who had emerged from hiding places around the clearing. They approached the human-acclimated youngster with visible curiosity. Sensory gills extended to sample its scent and the unfamiliar odors of humans it carried. Rather than rejecting these foreign elements, they seemed intrigued, gathering around Jaku and mimicking its interactions with the strange beings. Social learning in action, Nakamura noted with satisfaction. The juveniles are observing Jaku's behavior and incorporating it into their own repertoire. This is exactly how domestication began on Earth, young animals adapting to human presence more readily than adults, eventually normalizing that interaction for the entire group. "Dr. Nakamura," San said suddenly, his voice tight with renewed tension, "we have a situation developing at the perimeter." Nakamura looked up to see unusual movement among the adult Shreeth at the edge of the clearing. They had shifted position, forming a more defensive arrangement, their attention directed outward rather than toward the humans in their midst. Something's triggered their territorial response, she realized. With careful movements, she rose to her feet, maintaining the non-threatening posture they had established. "Makar," she said, using the name she had assigned the lead adult. "What's happening?" The massive Shreeth turned toward her, its sensory crest fully extended in what they had learned indicated alertness rather than aggression. It made a series of gestures, the danger signal Nakamura had introduced, followed by a sweeping motion toward the eastern edge of the clearing. "There's a threat approaching," Nakamura translated for her team. "Not us. Something else." She activated her comm unit. "Rulkani observation team, are you detecting any unusual activity in the vicinity? The Shreeth are displaying territorial alert behavior." Captain Raleigh's voice responded after a brief delay. "Our sensors show a transport vehicle approaching from the east. It's not one of ours." Her tone darkened. "Scanning suggests Xenocorp signatures. Heavy equipment, weapons hot. Mercenaries," San muttered. "But what would they be doing in Shreeth territory? It's suicide." The answer came as a distant rumble shook the ground. Even at considerable distance, The sound was unmistakable to anyone who had worked in frontier zones, mining charges, powerful enough to collapse underground structures. The hatching chambers, Nakamura realized with horror. They're trying to access the hatching chambers while the adults are distracted with us. Makar's reaction confirmed her assessment. The adult Shreeth emitted a piercing call that sent every juvenile in the clearing scrambling for cover. The adults formed a protective perimeter, their body language shifting from curious engagement to lethal readiness in seconds. Dr. Nakamura, Raleigh's voice came through the comm again. You need to withdraw immediately. If Xenocorp mercenaries are raiding hatching grounds, the entire area will become a battleground. Even with your arrangement with the Shreeth, you'll be caught in the crossfire. Nakamura looked at Makar, whose attention was now divided between the approaching threat and the humans in its territory. In that moment of crisis, she made a decision that would either cement the bridge they had begun to build or destroy it completely. We're not withdrawing, she announced, both to her team and to the listening Rulkani. Makar, she said, addressing the Shreeth directly and using the communication protocol they had established. We help against danger, together. The adult Shreeth's reaction was impossible to misinterpret. Its sensory crest pulsed in the pattern they had identified as recognition, and it made a sound that resonated through the clearing, not a hunting call or a threat display, but something new, something that sounded, to human ears, almost like acceptance. Have you lost your mind? Sa'an demanded. We're scientists, not soldiers. What exactly do you plan to do against armed mercenaries? Use our strengths, Nakamura replied, already activating her datapad to access the rover's remote systems. Lieutenant, you're an engineer. The Xenocorps don't know we're here, and they certainly don't expect humans working alongside Shreeth. We have surprise and local knowledge on our side. As she spoke, a plan was already forming, one that required coordination between not just her team, but the Shreeth and, potentially, the observing Rulkani. It was audacious, perhaps even foolhardy. But it offered something beyond mere survival. It offered proof of concept for the partnership she had promised from the beginning. Captain Raleigh, she called through the comm, we need your help. Not intervention, intelligence. Can your sensors give us the exact position and movement of the Xenocorp vehicles? There was a long pause before the Rulkani captain responded. The elders instructed that we would not assist if you endangered yourselves. This isn't about us anymore, Nakamura countered. This is about protecting Shreeth offspring from exploitation, about preventing mercenaries from turning sentient beings into weapons. Surely that aligns with Rulkani interests as well as ours. Another pause. Then, we're sending coordinates now. 3 heavy transports moving in formation toward the eastern hatching grounds. They're using sonic disruptors to drive away any Shreeth in their immediate vicinity. Perfect, Nakamura replied. She turned to her team. San, I need you to reconfigure the rover's containment field generator. If we can amplify the output and reverse the polarity, we might be able to create a disruption field that interferes with their equipment. Theoretically possible, Sa'an acknowledged, professional interest overriding his reservations. But we'd need to get within 100 meters for it to be effective. That's where our new friends come in, Nakamura said, turning back to Makar. Using the rudimentary communication system they had established, supplemented by gestures and Jakku's assistance as interpreter, she outlined a basic plan. The humans would use their technology to disrupt the mercenaries' equipment, while the Shreeth would use their knowledge of the terrain to approach undetected. It was a crude plan, limited by the communication barriers still present, but Makar seemed to grasp the essential concept. The adult Shreeth issued a series of calls that mobilized the others, sending some racing through the crystalline forest in coordinated patterns, while others remained to protect the juveniles in the clearing. Rulkani Observation Team, Nakamura called as her team hurried back to their rover. We're moving to intercept the Xenocorp transports. Any intelligence you can provide during the approach would be appreciated. Understood, Rala replied, her tone suggesting a decision had been made. We will maintain observation and provide tactical updates. A pause, then, Dr. Nakamura, good hunting. The improvised operation came together with surprising speed. With Saan working feverishly to modify the rover's containment field generator, the human team raced toward the coordinates the Rulkani had provided. Through the dense crystalline forest, they caught glimpses of Shrieth moving parallel to their course, massive forms flowing like liquid shadows between the glittering structures, silent and purposeful. This is insane, Saan muttered as he connected the final circuits in his modified disruptor. We're about to engage armed mercenaries alongside predators that were trying to eat us 3 days ago. Life adapts, Lieutenant, Nakamura reminded him with a small smile. Sometimes faster than we expect. They reached a ridge overlooking a shallow valley where the Xenocorp transports had stopped. Heavy machinery was already deployed, drilling into the rocky soil near what appeared to be a secondary hatching chamber complex. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, their weapons designed for maximum damage against large targets, clearly prepared for Shrieth resistance. They're after juveniles, Nakamura realized, watching through binoculars as a containment pod was positioned near the drilling site, probably intending to capture and weaponize them, using the same principles we demonstrated but for military applications. Can't let that happen, Saan agreed grimly. Disruptor is online, range is limited, but if we can get closer, we will, Nakamura assured him. Look, along the edges of the valley. Subtle movement indicated Shrieth taking position, at least a dozen adults, strategically placed to cut off any escape routes. They had responded to the coordinated attack on their young with a level of tactical thinking that confirmed everything Nakamura had theorized about their intelligence. Captain Raleigh, she called softly into her comm, we're in position. Any update on the mercenaries' equipment? Standard Xenocorp mining array, Raleigh replied. The drilling equipment is powered by a central generator at the rear of the main transport. Their sonic disruptors are effective against Shrieth sensory organs, but would be less useful against different physiologies. Like humans, Nakamura noted. Perfect. We'll target the generator with the disruption field. When their equipment fails, the Shrieth can approach without being affected by the sonics. The plan was simple but effective. With the rover's systems reconfigured to emit a targeted electromagnetic pulse, they would disable the Xenocorp generator, neutralizing both their drilling equipment and defensive sonics. In the ensuing confusion, the Shrieth would have a brief window to secure the hatching chambers before the mercenaries could regroup. On my mark, Nakamura instructed, watching as Saan made final adjustments to the disruptor. 3, 2, 1, now! The modified containment field generator engaged with a high-pitched whine. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, across the valley, the Xenocorp equipment flickered and died. The powerful drilling apparatus ground to a halt, and the sonic emitters mounted on guard posts fell silent. Shouts of confusion rose from the mercenaries as they scrambled to identify the source of the failure. That moment of disorganization was all the Shrieth needed. With a coordination that would have impressed military strategists, the adults surged from their hidden positions. They moved not in a chaotic charge, but in a disciplined pattern, targeting specific vulnerabilities in the Xenocorp position. Some focused on the equipment, massive limbs tearing through metal and composite materials with frightening ease. Others contained the armed guards, herding them away from both their weapons and the hatching chambers. Remarkable tactical awareness, Nakamura noted, recording the operation for later analysis. They're not killing indiscriminately, they're securing objectives and neutralizing threats. This is organized warfare, not predatory aggression. The Xenocorp mercenaries, faced with a coordinated attack by what they had believed to be mindless beasts, broke formation and fled toward their remaining operational transport. As they retreated, A new element entered the conflict, the Rulkani observation team, their own vehicle now positioned to block the mercenaries' escape route. "This wasn't part of the plan," Nakamura murmured, watching as Captain Raleigh emerged from the Rulkani transport, flanked by warriors in full battle gear. "Xenocorp elements," Raleigh's amplified voice carried across the valley. "You have violated Rulkani territorial sovereignty and attempted unauthorized resource extraction. Stand down and surrender your weapons." The mercenary leader, a burly humanoid whose species Nakamura couldn't immediately identify, stepped forward with hands raised in a placating gesture. "This is a misunderstanding. Captain, we had proper authorization for geological survey work." In Shreeth hatching grounds, Raleigh's crest flared in what Nakamura now recognized as aggressive challenge. "With drilling equipment and containment pods?" "I think not." As the confrontation between Rulkani and mercenaries unfolded, something even more significant was happening at the hatching chambers. The Shreeth, having secured the area, were now engaged in careful excavation, using their specialized forelimbs to clear debris from the drilling operation and assess damage to the underground structures. "We should join them," Nakamura decided, gesturing for her team to follow. "This is an unprecedented opportunity to observe Shreeth collective problem-solving in a crisis situation." They approached cautiously, still mindful of the volatile nature of their nascent relationship with the predators. Makar, recognizing their arrival, made the approach gesture they had established earlier, a clear invitation to join the rescue effort. What followed was a remarkable example of impromptu cooperation between species. The humans, with their technical knowledge and smaller, more dexterous hands, helped assess structural integrity and stabilize damaged sections of the hatching chambers. The Shreeth, with their superior strength and innate understanding of their own architectural needs, performed the heavy excavation work. Communication remained rudimentary, a combination of the signals they had established earlier and intuitive understanding of shared purpose, but it was effective enough for coordinated action. "They're adapting their behavior to accommodate our physiological differences," Nakamura observed as one adult Shreeth deliberately modified its digging technique to avoid showering the humans with debris. "This isn't just tolerance, it's active collaboration." By the time the Rulkani had secured the Xenocorp mercenaries and approached the hatching chambers, the joint human-Shreeth team had successfully stabilized the damaged structures and confirmed that the eggs within remained intact. Makar stood at the entrance, its massive form positioned protectively between the chambers and the approaching Rulkani. Captain Rala stopped at a respectful distance, her posture deliberately non-threatening. For a moment, representatives of the three dominant species of Carxon 7 regarded each other in silence. Predator, prey, and newcomer, their evolutionary relationships temporarily suspended in favor of something new. "The mercenaries have been contained," Raleigh reported, addressing Nakamura, but keeping her eyes on Makar. "Their equipment has been confiscated, and they will face justice under Rulkani law." "Thank you, Captain," Nakamura replied. She turned to Makar and made the safety gesture they had established, indicating that the threat had been neutralized. The adult Shreeth's sensory crest pulsed in acknowledgement, and its posture relaxed slightly, not dropping its guard entirely, but accepting the Rulkani presence as non-threatening. "What happens now?" Raleigh asked, her four eyes shifting between Nakamura and the assembled Shreeth. "This arrangement you've established, is it temporary? Or do you truly believe it can be sustained?" Nakamura considered the question carefully. "What we've achieved in these few days is only the beginning, a proof of concept that communication and cooperation are possible between species that evolution designed as adversaries. Sustaining it will require committed effort from all parties, including the Rulkani," she added pointedly. Ralegh's crest shifted in a pattern that Nakamura had learned indicated thoughtful consideration. "The elders will need to be convinced. Generations of belief are not easily overturned." "Then show them this." Nakamura suggested, gesturing to where humans and Shreeth continued to work together, clearing the last of the debris from the hatching chamber entrance. Not just predator and prey, but partners, each contributing what the other lacks. Before Raleigh could respond, movement from the hatching chamber caught their attention. Jakku emerged, followed by several juvenile Shreeth who had apparently been hiding within the deeper recesses of the structure. The injured juvenile, now moving more confidently as its damaged limb continued to heal, approached the gathering of adults with deliberate steps. What happened next would be recorded in scientific journals, diplomatic archives, and cultural histories across multiple worlds. Jakku positioned itself at the center of the gathering, directly between Nakamura, Makar, and Captain Raleigh. With precise movements that could only have been deliberately chosen, it performed a series of gestures that combined elements from all three species: the Rulkani formal greeting, the human partnership signal, and the Shreeth territorial acknowledgement. In that moment, the juvenile created something new, a hybrid communication protocol that transcended the evolutionary barriers between species. It was, in essence, the first word of a new language. Makar responded first, its massive form lowering in the non-aggressive posture it had demonstrated earlier. Then, to the amazement of all present, Captain Raleigh performed her people's formal acceptance gesture, a ritual normally reserved for recognizing new tribal alliances. Nakamura completed the circle by extending her hand, palm down, in the trust signal she had established with Jakku. "3 species," she said softly, though her words were meant more for the historical record than for those present. Separated by evolution but united by intelligence, this is how new futures begin. In the days that followed, the implications of what had occurred in Shreeth territory rippled outward through the Rulkani settlement and beyond. The elders, initially skeptical despite the evidence presented by Captain Raleigh, agreed to establish a formal observation post at the boundary between their territory and that of the Shreeth, a first step toward diplomatic relations with a species they had considered mindless killers for generations. The human team, meanwhile, began the process of translating their experiences into scientific protocols that could be replicated and expanded. Nakamura worked tirelessly, compiling data on Shreeth communication systems, social structures, and cognitive capabilities. What had begun as a speculative mission to demonstrate domestication potential had evolved into the foundation for an entirely new field of xenosociology. Jakku remained the linchpin of this emerging interspecies network. Though fully reintegrated with its pack, the juvenile continued to serve as intermediary between humans, Rulkani, and Shreeth. Its unique position, having experienced direct social bonding with another species, made it invaluable in establishing consistent communication protocols. On the final day of the human team's scheduled mission, a ceremony of sorts took place at the boundary between Rulkani and Shreeth territories. Representatives from all 3 species gathered to formalize what had begun as an improvised response to crisis. Elder Vextai, who had insisted on attending despite her advanced age, spoke for the Rulkani. "For generations, we have defined ourselves by what we feared," she declared, her translator rendering her words in standard English for the human team. "The Shreeth were death incarnate, forces of nature to be avoided or destroyed. In our fear, we never sought to understand." Her aged eyes shifted to where Makar stood at the head of a small group of adult Shreeth. "Perhaps it took outsiders, unburdened by our history, to show us what was possible." Nakamura, representing Earth's Xenozoological Institute, addressed the gathering next. "What we've witnessed on Carcassonne 7 isn't just a scientific breakthrough, but a philosophical one. The boundary between predator and prey isn't fixed by evolution. It can be transcended through mutual recognition of sentience and shared interest. The Shreeth aren't just remarkable predators, they're builders, thinkers, and now partners." The formal agreements established that day were modest in scope: designated meeting areas, basic exchange protocols, mutual protection of certain territories, but the potential they represented was revolutionary. Species that had evolved as mortal enemies were choosing cooperation over conflict, partnership over predation. As the human team prepared for departure, loading their equipment onto the shuttle that would return them to the orbital station, Captain Raleigh approached Nakamura with an unexpected request. "The Elders have authorized me to establish a permanent liaison position with both your institute and the Shreath territories," she explained, her crest displaying the pattern that indicated formal respect. "I would request your guidance in this role, Dr. Nakamura. Your methods have proven effective, if unconventional." Nakamura smiled. "The most important guidance I can offer is this. Approach with respect, not fear. See intelligence, not just threat. The rest follows naturally." She glanced toward the edge of the landing area, where Jakku had appeared to observe their departure. "And remember that sometimes the youngest among us see possibilities that experience blinds us to." The juvenile Shreath approached, moving with the confidence of a being that had found its place in a complex social network. Its injured limb had healed remarkably well, though it would always bear the distinctive gait that had first caught Nakamura's attention in the crystal basin. "You've changed everything," Nakamura told it, knowing the words themselves meant nothing but that the sentiment behind them might be understood. "For all of us." Jakku extended its sensory gills, sampling her scent one final time, memorizing it, perhaps for future reference. Then it performed the hybrid gesture it had created, the one that combined elements from all three species. A gesture that represented not just communication but transformation, the moment when prey became partners. As the shuttle lifted off, carrying the human team back toward the stars, Nakamura looked down at the receding landscape of Carxon 7. From orbit, it appeared as it always had, a hostile world of acid storms and crystalline forests, indifferent to the tiny beings that struggled for survival on its surface. But she knew that something fundamental had changed. Three species had looked beyond the roles evolution had assigned them and glimpsed a different possibility. In the shuttle's main cabin, her team was already processing data, preparing preliminary reports for the Xenozoological Institute. Lieutenant San, whose initial skepticism had given way to genuine intellectual fascination, looked up from his displays as Nakamura joined them. "We've only scratched the surface of Shreath cognitive capabilities," he noted. "The communication system we established is rudimentary at best, with proper resources and time. Others will continue the work," Nakamura assured him. "What matters is that we've opened the door, proven that even apex predators from Deathworlds can become allies rather than adversaries." "Is that really what happened, though?" one of the specialists asked thoughtfully. "Did we domesticate the Shreath? Or did they, domesticate us? Incorporate us into their social structure on their terms?" Nakamura smiled at the question. "Perhaps neither. Perhaps what we witnessed was mutual recognition, sentient beings acknowledging each other across the evolutionary divide." She glanced out the viewport at the stars emerging as they left Carxon 7's atmosphere behind. "The universe is full of predators and prey, but intelligence offers a third option: partnership. That's the legacy of what happened down there." As the shuttle docked with the orbital station, Nakamura completed her final log entry. The words would be transmitted across the galaxy, becoming part of humanity's growing understanding of its place among the stars. "We once thought domination was proof of superiority. True strength lies in partnership." On Carxon 7, three species separated by evolution found common ground through intelligence. Perhaps this is the true mark of sentience, not the ability to conquer, but the wisdom to cooperate. The orbital station rotated slowly against the backdrop of stars, Carxon 7 gleaming below like a deadly jewel. On its surface, a Rulkani patrol moved cautiously along the newly established boundary zone. Beside them, monitoring from a respectful distance, a pack of Shreath followed, not hunting, not threatening, but observing, learning, and between them, a juvenile with a distinctive gait led the way, building bridges where nature had placed only walls. In the violet light of an alien sunset, predator and prey moved as partners beneath a storm-swept sky, not because evolution had designed them for cooperation, but because intelligence had shown them a better way. It was not the end of an ancient struggle, but the beginning of something new, a future where the roles of hunter and hunted gave way to the shared identity of allies. When the next human expedition arrived on Carxon 7, they would find not a death world ruled by mindless killers, but a complex society of 3 species working to redefine their relationships. The path would not be easy. Evolutionary instincts ran deep, and trust built over days could be shattered in moments of crisis. But the door had been opened, the possibility demonstrated. In a universe where life took countless forms, intelligence remained the great equalizer, the force that could transform predators into partners, enemies into allies, and fear into understanding. It was humanity's gift to the stars, offered not through conquest but through patience, respect, and the simple recognition that even the deadliest hunters might choose cooperation when given the chance. And on Carxon 7, beneath acid storms and crystalline skies, that choice had been made, not once, but 3 times, by species that evolution had never intended to find common ground. In that choice lay the answer to the question that had driven Dr. Emily Nakamura across the galaxy. Is survival the mark of greatness, or the ability to transform bonds of fear into bonds of trust? The answer moved beneath violet skies, in the form of humans, Rulkani and Shrith walking side by side, not because nature had designed them for partnership, but because they had risen above design to forge something new, something better.